Hi, Sowmya.
Hi, hi, Sangeeta.
So we'll just give it another minute to just let people join in and we'll start. Also, everyone in the audience, if you can hear me and hear us, can you just give a thumbs up in the comment section, please? I repeat, if I am audible, please give. Okay, thank you, Veena. Okay, we're audible. That's great. Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I think we have an audience now, so we can get started. So, hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Book Talk. I'm Sangeeta from Team Tulika, and today I am chatting with Sowmya Rajendran. So, a little bit about our speaker for today. Sowmya Rajendran is a journalist and she is an author. She has written articles on gender, culture, and cinema. She has written more than 25 books, many with Tulika, of course, mainly in young adult fiction, picture books, and inspirational books for children. She was awarded the Sahitya Academy's Bal Sahitya Puraskar in 2015 for her novel Mayil Will Not Be Quiet. I'm just going to quickly show you that. It's this one right here. And her non-fiction book, Big Hero Size Zero Gender Talk, was chosen as an honor book at the Hindu Young World Good Books Awards in 2016. So that's this one. So, hi Soumya, it is so good to have you here with us today.
Hi, Sangeeta. I'm really happy to be here as well.
So, today also happens to be the National Girl Child Day and also International Day of Education. And we thought, who better to talk to than you, considering the kind of books you've written, the kind of themes you've sort of addressed, right, in all your work. So, actually, one of the first questions I want to start with is what drew you to writing, for young readers?
Well, I wanted to become a writer right from my childhood. So I was a huge Enid Blyton fan, and I used to read every book, every series that she wrote. And so every time somebody asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" the answer was always that I want to be a writer. And I wanted to give the same kind of joy that she gave me during my childhood to children who are growing up now. So I think writing for children automatically came to me, and I have a very irreverent kind of a personality. I love reading and writing humor. So I think all of that naturally inclined me to towards writing for children.
No, that's amazing. And I think it's usually like the books and stories we consume at a young age that sort of inspire and influence us in some way or another, right? So it's really cool that in some sense for you, it was also that in a way to kind of inspire you to be able to do this. And now you're inspiring others to be able to do this as well, which is amazing. But having said that, like I said, you've written, a lot of picture books and, chapter books. One being, another one I want to mention is Wings to Fly, which is about the life of Malti Holla, who is an athlete who is differently abled. It is about her. You've also written The Pleasant Rakshasa, which again is about beauty standards, and of course you've written the Mile series, which is a very popular chapter book series. So, what has your approach been in terms of writing for, say, early readers and young adults? Have they been very different, or have they actually been very similar for you?
So for me, the writing process starts with an idea. And I don't think about the audience when I'm working on the first draft of the story. It all depends on where the idea takes me. So, for instance, the idea for the Pleasant Rakshasa that you mentioned came because I was working with Chandamama Children's Magazine as an associate editor. And I used to sit next to this pillar with a Rakshasa, and he was always the villain in the story. In every in every story that I was editing, he was always the bad guy. So I wanted to overturn that, and I asked myself, what can we do to make this person a good guy? What if he were a pleasant person? So that's where the idea for the Pleasant Rakshasa came from, and it worked greatly. It worked well as a picture book. because it is at that age that children really start developing ideas about beauty. They don't already have it in them, but they start absorbing these ideas from the outside world, and that's when it starts. So that's the reason I made that a picture book. There are, of course, other books which lead to longer stories, like the Mayil books, for instance, was something that we really, I co-wrote the book with my friend from college, Nivedita Subramaniam. So that was a book where we wanted to delve into the mind of this young girl and kind of recall our own growing up experiences and childhood experiences. So that's why the book became a novel. So I think it really depends on where the idea takes you, and I'm comfortable writing for people across ages. So I don't change my writing style to suit any one particular readership. It just happens, like I said, it all falls upon where the idea really takes me.
Okay, so has there ever been a moment where you felt that, before writing, you have an idea and you kind of already know that this is going to be a picture book or say a chapter book? Or for you, is it just, I'll finish the draft and then see if this can be either or?
Yeah.
So how is it?
And so the first draft, I don't really know where this is going. The first draft is just me trying to articulate to myself what is it about this moment or this idea that has come to me. What is it that is so attractive to me about it? And then I try and explore it. So sometimes I think that I have this idea for a novel, and then I start writing out the draft, and then it turns out that it will work better as a picture book. So there is one with Sunita that's upcoming, which actually, I don't want to talk about what it is, but it actually started off as something I wanted to write for adults. So, but then, it turned out to be a picture book. So the first draft is a very initial stage where I'm trying to talk to myself about where I can take this idea. And then, of course, I start fleshing it out. I start doing second drafts and third drafts, and then I know, where this book is finally going. And then, of course, I think about my readership. How suitable is the language for the story for my readership? Should I simplify it further? Should I add more details? So all of that comes at a later stage.
Okay, no, that's really interesting to know what the process is like. And, kind of, because, you spoke about language and story, so I want to kind of bring it back to Mayil. So this is the first one in this series. And I'm just going to quickly show the other two books as well. It's a series of 3 books and very, fun, relevant books, I must say. You and Nivedita really sort of address very relevant issues about, growing up and what that experience is like. But having said that, I want to know, how do you kind of get your story and language right for books like this? Because my assumption is that, whatever said and done, we're in a very sort of evolving society and changing world. So then your experience of growing up and being a teenager, I'm sure, would be quite different from what it's like today. So then how do you kind of get your story and language right when you write a book like this for today's, kids?
So I think there's certainly a lot of difference between my world when I was growing up and children today. But there are also a lot of things that remain the same. The confusions of growing up, the fact that adults don't get those confusions, the communication gap that exists between the adult world and the teenagers world. So all of this are the same. And I have very vivid memories of my growing up years. If you ask me what I ate for breakfast today, I probably won't be able to tell you. But I have very distinctive memories from back then. So how I felt, the experiences that I had. So what Nivedita and I tried to do in this book was to kind of channelize those years in our writing. And I've always felt that when adults today try and imitate, how the cool people, the cool young people today are talking, it sounds really bad. It sounds really fake, and you really can't pull it off. So we didn't try to do too much of that, in the books. We just imagined ourselves our own growing up years and how it would be if it was happening in the world today. So of course there is a bit of technology coming into the book, and Mayil exploring things online, which wasn't so common in our years. So we did introduce some elements like that, but we didn't try and make it so very, we were not anxious about it being this very hep and happening kind of book. We wanted it to be a meditative, we wanted it to be a book that would sound genuine to its readers. So I would say that we went with the language that came naturally to us. We were just honest in our writing and in what we wanted to articulate.
No, and that really comes through. And what I think is really cool about the way this series of books is written is it's written in the form of a diary, right, of a young girl who is growing up in urban India. So you really sort of get an insight into what her headspace is like, and those questions of, like you said, of growing up. It's definitely, it shows. And, you know, honestly, credit to you and Nivedita for creating that sort of environment with the book, which I think is amazing. But you know, you've also written about topics like gender norms, like I said again, and I have to show this book again, which is Big Hero Size Zero. So I have to mention this was again one of the first books I read when I joined Tulika, and I absolutely loved it. And the fact that you were able to, you know, address very relevant issues for kids, you know, in that age around gender. You've also written about caste and, you know, being differently abled, again with Wings to Fly. I just want to show that again quickly. So how do you sort of create stories with these themes for children and sort of make them accessible? Because sometimes it can be, it could end up being too much for a child to read also. So how do you kind of go about creating it in a way that is accessible enough to a child to, you know, get what you're trying to say with the story?
Yeah, as a writer who writes for children, I always keep in mind that I shouldn't approach it in this attitude that I have something to teach you, that I have something, that I'm at this exalted position and I know everything and I'm giving you this information that you really need. I instead approach it as a kind of conversation that I'm having with my reader, where I see them as my equal. So I think this approach is necessary if you're going to talk about all these topics, because you assume that the child does not know or the child has not observed these things. Whereas children, in my experience, are extremely sensitive. They're very keen observers, and we shouldn't be assuming a lot of things about them. So, for instance, somebody approached me to write this book on a child with cerebral palsy. And it so happened that in the colony where I stay, there was one such child who had the condition. Uh, the editor who asked me to write the story, they actually wanted me to go about doing it like, you know, the child is getting bullied, and then they were doing this like an awareness kind of book, and they wanted me to approach it in this way, that this child is being bullied and targeted and how she deals with it. But in my experience, the other children in the colony had observed that this child was different from them, but they were accepting of that. They didn't, because they were all different in their own ways. So they didn't really, see this as something that had to be made fun of, or, so they were just willing to accept the fact that this person is different from us in some respects. So, but so what? So I think such experiences have really taught me that children are way more intelligent and way more sensitive than adults give them credit for. So when I write these books, that's how that's something that I always tell myself, that this shouldn't be something that I'm trying to teach anyone. So, but of course, when I choose my themes, I try and talk about things that I feel are important, things that I wish I had read about when I was a child. Because we did not have books that addressed a number of these things, and I think my life would have been a lot easier if I'd actually grown up reading all this, and if I'd known all of that, from a young age. So that's the reason I choose these things, but the tone and the subject matter and how I handle it, all of this comes from a place of humility.
Okay. No, that's really cool to know, because you're writing about very relevant issues, which I think a lot of kids can really, there's a lot to kind of absorb. Even for adults, I think these books are really great just in terms of getting certain themes and issues, right? So, again, hats off to you for kind of addressing these issues in sort of mainstream, children's literature. Having said that, the last question I kind of want to ask you is, how do you think literature can help with empowering young girls?
I think it's very important for young people to have representation in popular culture, in the content that they consume, be it books or movies, advertisements, TV serials, whatever. I think it is important for them to see people like them being represented positively and powerfully. And that is something which I never had much of when I was a child growing up. So in all the books that I read, in the children's books that I read, it would typically be the boys who had a very active role, who would be the decision makers, who would be the funny people. Whereas the girls would be these, a kind of a sedate kind of a character who's just there. They are cooking for the boys whenever they go on adventures and so on. So when I started writing for children, it was very important for me that I created characters who were empowered, who were diverse, and who were not afraid of their vulnerabilities, who were willing to, take the extra, to go the extra mile to prove themselves. So I've done one book with Tulika. Girls to the Rescue, which is a collection of fairy tale retellings where the princesses rescue themselves. And this book happened because my daughter was very young back then. She was like, she was just shifting to solid food. And I would keep giving her, you know how children are, they just refuse to eat their meal. And I would keep telling her stories. And then I realized that each time I was narrating a fairy tale to her, I would invariably change the ending because I couldn't bring myself to tell her that the princess has to wait for the prince to come and rescue her from a situation. So I started adding my own twists and changing the plot, and that eventually became a book with Tulika. So I think creating these empowered characters and changing these narratives is very important, and I think it's important for young girls to see that being normalized.
Yeah, and I think, with the kind of books you've especially written and come out with, I think that's definitely there. Like, again, I'm going to bring it back to Mayal because she's, again, a very strong character, or even with Wings to Fly. And so, hats off to you for creating such wonderful characters that children can really kind of look at. And I know I spoke about girls, but I think it's important also for young boys to see characters like this and kind of identify with women being, sort of strong and equal as well. So thank you so much, Sowmya. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And we look forward to all the other books you're going to come out with, especially with Tulika. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.